In this video, we are going to be learning how to create a table in Power BI. We're going to be learning how to create a table in Power BI. In addition to, we are going to be learning how to create measures. We're going to be creating measures. We're going to create a net sales measure. We're going to create a cost amount measure, and we're going to create a margin measure. We're going to be creating measures, net sales, cost amount, and margin, and we are going to be learning how to create a table. Good thing about this particular, well, probably the next next series or so of these videos, advantage those that are not in my class, that are not in my mentorship, learning Power BI in the Power of the BI mentorship. For you guys that are not in it, you are lucky, because what I am going to be doing is I am going to be using these next few videos, series of videos, to actually revamp my class structure, to revamp the videos in my class. The videos in my class actually now are about 2 years old, because I created the course about 2 years ago. So I'm actually going to be revamping the class. I'm going to be adding, updating the videos in the class, updating the types of information that's in the class, and I'm going to be doing that by giving you guys out here on YouTube a sneak peek of what is actually in the class. So you know that's a good thing. Now, be totally honest with you, totally transparent. I will not be giving all of the class away, because then there would be no reason for you to join the class if you could just watch everything on YouTube. But here's the deal. That does not mean that I'm going to be gatekeeping, okay? That means that I am not going to be going into the details and the weeds of how to make everything happen and how this thing goes down. But you will have enough information to be dangerous out here on YouTube. I can guarantee you that. So with that said, we are going to go ahead on and get busy. But before we do, I know I normally forget. I want to say, like this video, subscribe to this channel, like this video, subscribe to this channel. It helps us out a lot. It gives us information as to what you are enjoying and what you are in need of. And it just gives us help. Just gives us some extra insight. You know, those of us that are out here in data, we like to have insights. So like this video, subscribe to this channel. Like this video, subscribe to this channel. Other thing is, what we also are going to be doing starting in this video, we are going to be, you can connect with us and join our community by scanning the QR code in the corner below. Scanning the QR code in the corner below. What that is going to do, that's going to give you access to joining our weekly webinar. Now, of course, those of you that have already participated in our weekly webinar, you know our weekly webinar is a community. It's not just a regular webinar, it's a community. And it's a totally free webinar, totally free. So what does that mean? That means that you do not have to pay to learn information, to get information from me or from my community. If you join the webinar. Webinar is every Thursday from 7:30 p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Every Thursday from 7:30 p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. So I encourage you to scan the QR code and join our community, our webinar community. There will be chances for you to ask questions that you may have that ordinarily, you know, you would probably only have access to do inside of the actual course, Power of the BI. But in our free webinar, you have that access. In addition to, we go over some Power BI fundamentals, we go over some Power BI advanced tips and tricks, and we go over some Power BI human resource activity. What does that mean? Power BI human resource activity. That means, where are some of those jobs that are out there? Are there jobs out there? What does that mean for you? That means that if you're a part of the Power BI, if you're a part of our Power of the BI community inside, participating in our webinars, you will have access to those jobs. Because you can say, hey, I don't really need any Power BI assistance. I'm just looking for a job, brother. I don't even need any Power BI assistance. The only thing I'm looking for is some stability, extra money, relocation, whatever the case may be. Doesn't really matter. You want to work remote, you want to work hybrid, you want to work on site, really doesn't matter. We've got jobs that we have listed that are only available to our community. So I encourage you again, scan the QR code here in the video, at the corner of the video, and join our webinar community so that you will be have access to our webinars and have access to our free newsletter where we again give out tons of information within our weekly newsletter. You don't want to miss that. So we are going to get busy. My question though, I do have a question. You're here, you're checking out the videos, you are somewhat interested in Power BI. My question to you is, why are you not a part of the community? Okay, why are you not a part of the community? Or why haven't you taken the next step to join our 5-day challenge and really get deep into the weeds of Power BI? Now, the reason why I asked that is because I think I probably know the answer. And the answer probably is you feel like, well, I'm really not a tech person. I'm really not very, very tech savvy. Listen, man, I'll be totally transparent with you. When I got into Power BI, I wasn't tech savvy either. I wasn't very tech savvy either. And I had the same belief that if I wasn't tech savvy, if I didn't know a whole lot about tech, or I wasn't already in the tech space, that I probably wouldn't be able to be successful in Power BI. With that said, that is totally untrue. So if that is you, if you're feeling like, hey, I am not in the tech space, I am not very tech savvy, and I probably wouldn't be very successful in tech, I probably wouldn't be able to take the leap to increasing my salary or controlling where I work, whether it be hybrid, on-site, or remote, because I'm just not a tech guy, and I'm just looking at these videos just to give me a little extra boost. One is, I hope you get that extra boost. Two is, I want you to understand that that is totally untrue, and you really need to be a part of our communities to really understand what your true value is. With that said, I'm not going to beat that dead horse. I'm just going to encourage you to scan the QR code and to join our community. Again, the community is free. We do a free webinar, get together every Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time to 9 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. And you have access to you have access to me once a week, because I conduct the webinars for the most part, unless I'm out and someone else does it. But for the most part, 90% of the time, I'm conducting the webinars. But at the end of the day, you will have access to our free webinars, you'll have access to me, and you will have access to our weekly newsletter that just gives you tons of information. I can't even tell you how much information you will be able to have access to with our free webinar. Anyway, let's get busy. Let's move into how to create a table. Let's move into how to create a table. And of course, this is from Power BI Desktop as we are creating tables. And basically what I am going to do is just simply walk you through how to, well, initially I'm going to walk you through how to create a table, and then we are going to get into building out some measures. So let's see here. So basically we're looking at the Power BI Desktop, and coming over to the visualizations pane, we are just selecting the visual for the table. And it simply is really just as simple as what we just did here, just dragging the table into the Power BI Desktop report view. And now what we want to do is we want to select the table that we actually want to bring the data in from. So we've got several tables here. The table that we are looking at is the fact sales table, and we have several columns in the fact sales table. So what we are going to do is we are going to drag and drop those columns that are in the fact sales table into our table that we are creating here in the Power BI report. So all we're doing here is we're dragging and dropping. As you remember, the first thing we did was we did a drag and drop. We grabbed the visualization and we dragged it into the report view. Now we're just dragging and dropping the columns that are in the actual table that we are using for the data, and we're dragging that data into the table that we drug into the report view. The reason why I keep placing emphasis here on that is because it is just as simple as dragging and dropping. We are just simply dragging and dropping to create a view here in Power BI in the report view. It's just that simple. I mean, I could make it complicated if you wanted me to, but it's really no need. I could make it complicated, but there's really no need. I am just dragging and dropping the columns into the report view, into the table that we have that we brought into the report view. Now, as you can see, some of the data, some of the tables, some of the column names show that we've got aggregations going on. And what I mean by that is we have like count of ID, sum of quantity, sum of the different amounts, and basically what we are going to do is eventually we are going to remove those aggregations. As you see here, sum of, we've got sum of there. And basically when you get sum, it pretty much what Power BI is doing is it's acknowledging that the data, the type of data that is in that report or in that column is some type of number, whether it be an integer, a whole number, a decimal, whatever the case may be. It's some type of number that can be added, divided, subtracted, multiplied. So what they're doing is it automatically gives us the aggregation. So what we're going to do in a later step is we're going to remove those aggregations so that it just won't be there. I don't want to make it any more complicated than what it is. It's really not that complicated. But here, all we're doing is we're just dragging and dropping, and basically we are dragging and dropping all of the columns that are in the table. All of the columns that are in the table, we are dragging and dropping those columns into our Power BI report, into the table that we have created. Now, the green check marks that you see, when you see the green check marks, or you see the green boxes with the white check mark inside, what that means is that those columns have already been used. So that's how I know which columns have or have not been used. Now here, what I'm doing here is I'm just inputting columns pretty much in just random order. It's really it's nothing specific particularly that I'm doing here. I am just putting the columns in here randomly. Now what I am doing is I am going in, and as I said, we see the count of. What I want to do is I want to remove the count of. So if I highlight, if I look at here, we've got count of, I'm going to say don't summarize. So I don't want that column summarized. And I'm just checking the different columns here in the table. I could just look at the columns that we drug in, I would say that we did drag in. But you know, in addition to, I'm looking at the table because we created the table. I look at this column and I see that we have another aggregation, and I want to say don't summarize again. So again, I'm going to come into that table. I'm going to click the down arrow, and I'm going to say don't summarize. This is not necessarily a trick or a challenge, but it's something sometimes we forget when we're creating Power BI reports, and when we're validating the data against the original data that we are bringing into the report. Sometimes that data we're not able to validate it because our counts are off, or our columns the column addition is off. And the reason why it's off is because Power BI automatically gives us this aggregation being a sum when it's a number, when it's a whole number, an integer, or a decimal number. It automatically does it. So then when we are validating our data that we have against the data that we've created in our tables, or even in our other KPIs, the data, we're not able to validate it. We're not able to match it up. We're not able to get the correct information or match that information because of the sum or the count of a column. So the one thing I do want you to remember is when you're creating a column and you're dragging in, with creating a table or creating a KPI, and you're dragging in the column that's being used, be sure to remove the aggregation, the sum of, or the count of, so that you'll be able to successfully validate the data that you have in your report. So we're just going down, we're checking all of the columns, and we see we still have a few columns left. So we can actually scroll over in the table, or we can scroll down in our columns that we did drag in, and we can continue to see that we've got sum of, sum of, sum of. So we are going to just keep clicking the down arrow, and we are going to do don't summarize. We do not want to summarize. Now, there are some cases, there are some instances where we may want to summarize. In this particular case, we do not. I don't want to go too deep again into the weeds as to when you may want to summarize the data and when you may not want to summarize the data. Just understand that more often than not, you are going to use the don't summarize there in the column drop downs. Let's see here. It looks like we have one more don't summarize, well, one more sum, which is net. Well, I see another one. Well, no, I think it's just all we have left is sum of net sales. So we'll need to remove the sum of from net sales as well. We're just moving. Now, what I'm doing here is I am just showing you that we can create columns. When we drag the columns in, we can move. When we bring the columns in, we can move the columns to different locations. They don't have to stay in the same location. We can place a column before a column. We can place a column after a column. We can move columns all the way up to the top. We can move columns all the way down to the bottom. So once we drag the columns in, we can place the columns wherever we want to place them. And we can do what? We can also delete all of the columns that are in there. And as we saw before, we could just drag those columns in. We could just drag the columns in. But what I also want to show you is not only can we drag the columns in, we can also click the column that we want, and it will appear in the columns as well. So now you see we're getting the green box highlighted with the white check mark just by clicking the box as well. So rather than having to drag the columns in, we can click the boxes, or we can click the box next to the column, and the columns will appear. And they will appear in the order in which we select, in the order in which we check the boxes. Again, we perform the don't summarize the same way as we did initially. Nothing changes there. The only thing changed here is that in the initial way that we brought the columns into the table, is that we did a drag into the column pane. And in this particular case, we did not drag into the column pane. We just highlighted the column. We highlighted the box next to the column, and it shows us the green box with the white check mark. So now we know that those columns are in the pane as well. And just as we did before, we can go in and we can say don't summarize. So again, nothing is different from the way that we entered the columns into the column pane initially, with the exception of, rather than dragging the columns over, we just did a highlight and a check. We just checked the box next to the column that we wanted to bring into the column pane. Outside of that, everything else is the same. We can remove the summarizations. We can move the columns up and down. We can put the columns in different orders, bring the columns all the way to the top, and we can also take the columns all the way down. Now, what I want to do here is let's see. What I am going to do now is Let's see, I can get another visual out. Let's bring this one over here. That's the right one. And I am going to go just a little bit deeper as we are going to create measures, net sales, cost amount, and margin amount measures. Give me 1 second. I will bring that over. Let's see. And here, I am not going to make sure it's the right, yes, right one. So let's see here. Okay. Now, what we have here, just double checking order ID. Okay, so what I want to do here initially is I want to get the order of the actual data that's in the table. I want to place it in the same order just so that you can see what that looks like in the table. The order that's in the actual table that we brought in, I want to place it in the same order that we have here. So all I did was I just went in and I deleted all of the columns out again, as you saw that we did before. And now I am just placing the order of the columns, attempting to place the order of the columns in the same order in which they were in the table. So that's why I'm going back and forth to what this is, the data view. So I'm coming back over to the data view, just looking at the order in which the columns are and placing the columns in the same order. Because as you know before, when I was building out the table initially, it really didn't matter what order the table was. And it really still doesn't matter right now. I know it'd be easier for you to understand what's going on if I place the columns in the same order. And normally when I build out a Power BI report, the first thing I do is build out a table. I build out a table view, and the table that I normally build is basically this same table. So if I have a report, if I'm building a report, I would bring the table in. I would come over to so this is our report view. I would go back to the data view to see what order the columns are in the initial table. And I would try to I would not necessarily try, I would put the columns in the same order. And it doesn't have to happen that way. It just it's just my starting point when I typically build out a Power BI, when I start to build out a Power BI report. Doesn't have to happen. I don't do it all the time, but I do it probably 90% of the time, if not more. I may not even use the table. Most of the time I don't use the table that I start out with, but it gives me my first visualization. It gives me the first visual that I have in the report. So all I'm doing here is I am bringing the columns to the same order that's in the data view. Now what I'm doing is I'm just coming over and as I showed you before, removing the don't summarize. Just taking don't summarize out because I don't like for the data to be aggregated. And now again, what I will tell you again is there are instances where you will want to summarize the data, and there are instances where you don't want to summarize the data. More often than not, when you're bringing in the initial table, you're not going to want to summarize the data. So that's just That's just my rule of thumb, not necessarily a rule of thumb that always works, because there are instances when you will get an idea of when to summarize the data and when not to summarize the data. But if you have to, my suggestion is, if you have to ask, don't summarize. If you have to ask, don't summarize. So here we are, and we are back in the data view, making sure we have all the columns that we are looking for, or have the columns in the same order in which, because we know it's the same columns, because the columns that are in the data view are going to be the same columns in the report view. It's just a matter of those columns being used in the actual report that we use for the table visualization. Now what we're going to do is we are going to build a table. Again, if you're interested in joining our free community, I encourage you to scan the QR code and join our free Power BI webinar. If you're interested in learning more about Power BI, you got some things you want to know, just having a community to be around is definitely a great place to be. We have a lot of information, a lot of insights, a lot of individuals that were just like you that are now movers and shakers in the Power BI community. I encourage you again to join our free community, scan the QR code, and join our free community, and we look forward to seeing you win next Thursday. So now what we are doing is we are building a table to hold our measures in. We're building a table to hold our measures in. The reason why I like to do that is because it gives us a table that only has measures. Now remember that measures can be used anywhere in the report. We will be using calculated columns a little later on, but right now we're only using measures. Measures can be used anywhere in the report. A calculated column can only be used inside of the table that is created. So they're created very similarly. They're both DAX measures. They're both DAX calculations, but the measure can be used anywhere in the report. Basically, it's a formula. If you're familiar with any type of computer program, it's just a formula, right? It's just a calculation. It could be used anywhere in the report. A measure can be used anywhere in the report. A calculated column can only be used in the table in which it was built. Now, with that said, I'm not going to beat that dead horse because that could get relatively confusing depending. But, so what I'm doing here is I am building out a measure. And the measure that I want to create first is the net sales measure. We want to create the net sales measure. And in order to create the measure, in order to create the measure from the table that we're using, we have to use the function sum. We've got to use sum first, and then we're going to say we want the sum of the table with the specific column. We're only going to be getting the sum of the column, but we have to tell the report, we have to tell Power BI that we're using the sum function, and we have to tell it that we want to get it out of a specific table. So the first object you're going to see is it's going to be sum of the table, which is the fact sales table, and what we want out of the fact sales table, that specific column being for net sales. Then we are finding the cost amount. We're finding the cost amount. Same thing for the cost amount. We're just creating a function, or we're creating a measure to say we want to know what is the sum of the cost amount, well, the sum of the fact sales table in the cost amount column, right? And basically, you'll see here shortly that we're going to be able to check this against what we already have. But what it's allowing us to do is to create a margin amount. And if you have any business, if you understand business a little bit, you understand that net sales minus the cost amount is going to give us the margin amount. So we don't have to use the column and the table for the margin amount, because the margin, we've already calculated the net sales. We've already calculated the cost amount. So now we just need to use margin amount equals net sales minus the cost amount. Here I can put parentheses around this. We don't have to put parentheses around this, but we can. It could get interesting if we use this with other combinations of other measures in the future. But when we talk about coding in Power BI, this really is about as complicated. Yeah, I'm not gonna say as complicated. It could get a little bit. It could get a little bit more complicated, but this is very simple. This is very simple, and in many Power BI reports, this is about as much coding degree as you would have as far as just one line of code. Very, very seldom have I seen, large amounts of code throughout a Power BI report. There could be variables within a Power BI report that are used, but for the most part, one line of code is what we use. I'm gonna say probably 90% of the time. So what I'm showing you here is, again, the measures that we created, the net sales amount, the margin amount, and the cost amount. We can drag these into this table. And if there were other parts of this report that we create, we could use these same measures, because again, a measure can be used anywhere in a Power BI, anywhere in a Power BI report. When we start using calculated columns, you will find that the creating of the calculated column will be very similar to a measure, but when we create a calculated column, it's only good for the table you created in. It's not going to be able to be used throughout the report, whereas a measure is used throughout the report. Now we're seeing here that we did already have a margin amount calculation that was already created. I just wanted to show you that that margin amount is the same as the measure that we created for margin amount. So we know that our measure is correct. So if the net sales is correct and the cost amount is correct, the margin amount is correct, because we checked the margin amount against the margin amount that we already have, which is considered to be validating data. So creating a table, creating a measure, is just as simple as that. Hey, look, I thank you for joining in, and I look forward to seeing you win again in the next video.